Once upon a time, before cup holders became sacred and center consoles ruled the road, there was a different kind of front seat, wide, flat, and unapologetically communal: the bench seat. It was a hallmark of mid-century motoring, a relic from an era when driving was as much about togetherness as it was about the destination. Families squeezed in, couples slid closer, and long drives felt like a front-row couch to the American dream. But what started as a symbol of freedom eventually stalled in the fast lane of innovation. As car designs evolved, priorities shifted. Comfort, safety, and customization became the new gods of design. Bucket seats, with their ergonomic curves and sporty appeal, slowly pushed bench seats into the margins of memory. Safety regulations played their part too, with airbags, seat belts, and center consoles requiring more individualized space. The CQZ bench seat simply couldn't keep up. By the early 2000s, they were nearly extinct outside of pickup trucks. Now all that remains is nostalgia, stitched into pleated vinyl and fading leather. A bygone innovation that once brought us closer, now left behind in the rearview mirror of automotive history. Before climate control and dual-zone AC, there was a simpler kind of luxury: the vent window. Also known as wing windows, these clever little triangles were a quiet revolution in comfort. Crack one open, and you get a refreshing breeze, funneled right into your face without the buffeting wind of a rolled-down window. For decades, they were a staple in sedans and coupes, especially in the pre-air conditioning era. But as the auto industry evolved, so did our expectations. Air conditioning went from optional to essential, and suddenly these humble panes of glass started to look like inefficiencies. They added noise, they weren't aerodynamically ideal, and they became another potential entry point for thieves. One by one, manufacturers closed them off, literally and figuratively. Today, vent windows are ghosts from a time when driving was tactile, mechanical, and breezy. What was once a clever bit of functional design now lingers only in vintage, restorations, and collectors' memories, a tiny window into a world that no longer exists. The sound of a cigarette lighter clicking into place was as familiar to drivers as the turn of a key. Ashtrays weren't just accessories, they were standard. Built into dashboards, door panels, and even seat backs, they were part of the very DNA of 20th century car design, because back then, smoking wasn't just accepted, it was expected. Cars became rolling lounges where a long drive meant a cigarette in one hand and the steering wheel in the other. The built-in lighter made it convenient, and the ashtray gave it a home. Some even came with removable inserts for easy cleaning, a small luxury of a smoke-filled era. But as science caught up with culture, the tide turned. The warnings grew louder, public spaces banned smoking, and society began to clear the air. Quite literally. With fewer drivers lighting up and more choosing clean, smoke-free environments, automakers quietly phased out these once essential features. Today, ashtrays and cigarette lighters are rare sightings, relics of a different lifestyle, often repurposed as coin holders or USB ports. What was once ordinary now feels like an artifact, a reminder that cars, like culture, are always evolving. In the golden age of chrome, white walls, and tail fins, when cars were not just machines but statements, luxury meant pushing boundaries, and nothing said high class in the 1950s quite like your favorite vinyl spinning beneath the dashboard. Enter the in-car record player, a marvel of mid-century innovation designed to bring the elegance of the living room into your rolling Cadillac or Chrysler. It sounded like a dream. Slide in a 7-inch record, press play, and let the hits of Nat King Cole or Elvis Presley soundtrack your cruise down Route 66. But there was one small problem: the road. Potholes, gravel, and uneven terrain didn't pair well with the delicate touch of a phonograph needle. Songs skipped, warped, or cut out entirely, and what was meant to be smooth jazz often became a jittery jumble. Despite clever engineering and high hopes, the in-car record player was doomed by physics. By the early 1960s, it had been replaced by something far more stable, the 8-track, and later the cassette. But for a brief moment in time, vinyl ruled the road. There was a time when your car didn't just drive, it made a statement. And leading the way, proudly perched above the grille, was the hood ornament. From leaping Jaguars to winged goddesses, and like this one, the Art Deco spirit of speed. These sculpted emblems weren't just decoration, they were declarations of elegance, power, and identity. In the golden age of motoring, a hood ornament was a crown, the final touch on a machine, built with pride. Each design was a masterpiece. In miniature, a symbol of craftsmanship and status. But as the decades passed, the world changed. Safety regulations, concerns about pedestrian injuries, and a shift toward sleeker, more aerodynamic design spelled the slow disappearance of the ornament. What once stood tall became recessed, stylized, or disappeared entirely. Modern cars now favor badges and subtle branding over statuesque icons, yet these ornaments live on, not just in museums or collectors' garages, but in the memory of a more romantic automotive era, a time when cars had soul and faces. There was a time, before touchscreens, AirPods, and Bluetooth, when this was the height of high-tech, the built-in car phone. If you had one in the 1980s or early 1990s, you weren't just driving, you were doing business. These weren't just phones, they were power statements, symbols of success, wealth, and cutting-edge convenience. Mounted right into the dash or center console, they were clunky, corded, and often expensive to operate. But for a moment in time, they were the pinnacle of mobile communication. CEOs, lawyers, politicians. If you were important, your car talked too. But the future doesn't wait for cords. As personal cell phones became more compact, more affordable, and infinitely more functional, the built-in car phone quickly became a relic. By the early 2000s, Bluetooth swept in, and suddenly, hands-free was the new luxury, not wired-up dashboards. Now, all that remains of these vehicular status symbols are photos, nostalgia, and a lot of questions from Gen Z. A time when your car didn't just light up the road, it blinked. Pop-up headlights were more than just functional. They were a flex. Sleek by day, glowing by night, they made every sports car look like it was winking at the future, from the Ferrari Testarossa to the Corvette in front of you. These hidden gems defined automotive design from the 1960s through the 1990s. With a flick of a switch, they emerged with a mechanical hum, turning every night drive into a cinematic experience. But behind the style came the struggle. Pop-up. Headlights were delicate, overcomplicated, and often prone to failure. One would rise while the other stayed shut, giving your car a permanent squint. And then came the regulators. Stricter safety standards and aerodynamic efficiency goals meant pop-ups had to pop off the design board. By the early 2000s, the era of retractable cool had come to a close. Today, pop-up headlights live on in our memories, a stylish echo of a time when cars had personality and your headlights had swagger. Landau bars were once the pinnacle of old-world elegance on luxury cars, a nod to horse-drawn carriages that suggested refinement and prestige. Their curved chrome accents on vinyl roofs gave vehicles a formal, almost regal appearance, especially on classic coupes and funeral cars. But as automotive tastes evolved, minimalism took the driver's seat. Sleek, aerodynamic designs made ornate details feel excessive and outdated. By the late 1980s, Landau bars had all but vanished, seen more as anachronisms than art. Today, they live on mostly in nostalgia, representing a time when style spoke louder than speed and elegance rode in the details, another forgotten flourish, left behind in the race toward the future. Amor, Before paddle shifters and digital drive modes, there was the column-mounted shifter, affectionately known as 3 on the tree. It was simple, space-saving, and widely used from the 1940s through the 1970s. Mounted on the steering column, it let drivers shift gears without ever reaching down. For decades, it was a staple in family sedans, pickups, and even luxury models like this Cadillac. But as car interiors evolved, so did ergonomics and style. Floor shifters offered sportier vibes and more intuitive positioning, while automatic transmissions removed the need for manual gear engagement altogether. Slowly but surely, the column shifter was pushed aside, from icon to obsolete. Today, it's a charming reminder of a hands-on era when driving meant being more connected to the machine, a forgotten gesture from a time when shifting gears felt like part of the journey. Before SUVs and roof boxes took over road trip duty, there was a simpler solution, the trunk-mounted luggage rack. A chrome frame bolted to the back ready to haul extra bags, picnic gear, or a vintage suitcase tied down with leather straps. It was practical, stylish, and gave your muscle car or cruiser a hint of adventure. Popular in the 1960s and 1970s, these racks added utility without taking up precious cabin space. But times changed. Concerns over theft, exposure to the elements, and the evolving preference for cleaner car designs eventually made the external rack look more like clutter than convenience. As hatchbacks and roof carriers gained traction, the chrome racks disappeared, now seen mostly at car shows or in vintage catalogs. A nostalgic nod to the days when packing light wasn't an option, and looking good while overloaded was part of the fun.